our third speaker, Marquis.
Thank you for that beautiful speech, Whitney. Next, we have Marquis Taylor. Marquis is an entrepreneur, motivational speaker, minister, and activist. I learned that an entrepreneur is someone who organizes and operates their own business. Thank you for being with us today, Marquis.
Thank you for having me. How you doing? My name is Marquis Taylor. I grew up here in Grand Rapids, Michigan for 30 years. I haven't been here all my life. I just kind of wanted to give a glimpse on my background here growing up and a little bit of some of my experiences up until where I'm at today. So I grew up on the southeast side of Grand Rapids, Michigan, what you may consider the third ward. And those areas are more urban and more predominantly diverse, and also have a lot of crime and things of that nature. Growing up in that area, you can go a block away and there's crime, there's drugs and things of that nature. You go to the next block and it can be completely quiet and clean, things like that. But my biggest thing that I want to kind of point out is being Black in Grand Rapids and in America as a whole. Growing up, I've seen a lot of my friends, picked out and stopped by police officers due to us just being in a certain area, due to us just hanging out, being together, just hanging out as friends. I've been through several instances where I've been frisked as a kid just because I was Black at a store, things of that nature, just because it's predominantly or consisted of being a drug area, things of that nature. So I had a rough experience growing up because everything was so narrow-minded when it comes to African Americans. I don't think I've ever seen a white person in my community stretched or stopped by the police, and that's a known fact from my perspective. So when you grow up and experiencing those things, and then you begin to think, why is it like this? And then as I got older, I began to come to the grips that there is systematic racism, there is prejudice still going on today, where you're prejudged just because of your color, your skin. Like Caleb spoke on, that he was treated specifically different from his colored friends, and that happens all the time. Speak for me personally, at the age of, I think, 15, I was stopped by the police, or necessarily harassed by the police. Me and a friend of mine were in the neighborhood, and we visited a friend's house, and for some strange reason, he took off running. And when the police came to the backyard, to the door where we were, they stopped me and they checked me, they frisked me. I guess they happened to find some drugs far away from me, and they put me in the car, and they said, "Do you know what that is?" They set some drugs on the desk and said, "Do you know what that is?" I said, "Absolutely not." They said, "Well, that's a felony," insinuating that they were going to charge me with the felony for the drugs that weren't even mine. And someone in the neighbor happened to see me, and and they called my mother. So when they called my mother showed up, and she talked to the officers, and these two officers specifically were known to be harassing those areas all the time, meaning they will always be in that area. They will always be looking for certain people, certain things of that nature. So she asked him a question like, why do you have my son? He said, "Oh, he was in this area, and we was checking on this area. Guy ran, and we found this." She like, "But that wasn't on his person." He like, "No, but et cetera, et cetera." Long story short, if she had not shown up, I would have been a statistic in police brutality, systemic racism. I would have been another statistic. I would have had a felony that day, and I would have been charged with some drugs that wasn't even mine. So as I moved beyond that, I began to just trying to seek out, why is things like this? So as I got older, God had kind of worked some things out for me where he positioned me to meet some certain people. And I met a friend of mine named Lori Tannis in the downtown Grand Rapids area. She's an entrepreneur. She owns some property downtown, and she reached out to me and some of my other friends, and she worked with us. You know, she tried to identify with us what the issues were, and she happened to be white. And growing up, I didn't have too many mentors and things like that. I didn't have a father in the home, and I think that's another aspect of why systemic racism and injustices in communities of color is more so predominant, because there's no fathers and there's no mentors in the community to help fight and combat these issues. We don't have no one to look up to, so we try to identify and find out things on our own as young people. And we got our moms are single predominantly, and they have to raise us alone, and you only could teach a young man so much. So it's things like that that I drew to kind of combat myself personally, try to identify ways to become that mentor, to become a father. I'm a father to myself, so I try to be the best father I can be, because I know it's important. I try to be that mentor because I know that image is important to the young people today, and then that's the only way to kind of come out of this as a whole. But as far as a systematic perspective, I think, again, as Whitney had pointed out, that and Caleb, that, you know, the white people have to step up. You know, our white counterparts have to step up and speak against these injustices. Because I believe, if you're in a position where you're not technically black, that is not your concern. And I see that all the time. I see a lot of people kind of ignore things because it's not them, or they don't have to deal with it. But I strongly believe that these systemic issues are happening because people have created a culture where they don't speak on it, or they don't think it's necessary to speak up because they will lose something. I don't think George Floyd's life should have came to a death just because his officer had sit there and witnessed it and just watched it, thinking that it was something normal. And no, that whole scene just didn't sit with me. So things of that nature. So I just believe that if we come together as a people, and that we do away with our differences, and that we be realistic about what's going on in our society, that, you know, we have to work these things out together, and we have to come together and come up with a plan to break down these systems that allows police brutality, that allows people to make excuses for the crime and the wrongs that they're doing.
Marquis, thank you so much for that. I feel like you really spoke on a lot, which was very informative. We have, would you be okay if we come back for the questions? It looks like we had quite a few come in for you, Marquis, and just have Chief Payne speak for a couple minutes, because he had an emergency come up today, and we'd like to have him speak for a couple minutes and then come back to questions that we had for you. Is that okay?
Yes, that's fine.
How do you feel as a Black man it is to try to fit into a white environment? And do you do that often? And how do you do that without getting yourself mentally beat
down? I do that really by faith and substance, per se. Like, I've learned to cultivate the experiences that I've been through, and then kind of articulate it in a way where, you know, I present myself strongly and effectively based on believing in who I am, you know, what's necessary, what's important, you know, how should I carry myself. I think your character personally identifies and expounds out about who you really are. So usually when I go to different realms that I'm not used to being in, I'm just be myself, and just trust and believe that I am important and that I have an asset to that space and to that sphere that I'm in. So I don't allow, you know, my counterparts, even though they may be the majority, to make me feel some type of way. I'm here to be like yeast, to kind of, like, you know, spread out who I am and take over the atmosphere if possible. You know, I just always believe in myself, to have integrity and faith.
Very good. Again, I know that you have to run off, but do you have any closing remarks or any calls to action that you'd like the listeners to hear?
Yeah, so the final thing that I kind of really wanted to know, as I see what's going on across the nation and a whole as in Grand Rapids, Michigan, is that we just have to have a heart for these things that are going wrong. We have to have a heart for those things. We have to have a great sense of accountability for the things that actually that matter, you know, like people's lives, all lives, especially Black lives, if they're being disproportionately abused and misused and killed. I think that we should be collectively as a one race to come together and combat these injustices, that we all should be treated fair and equally.
Very good. Thank you, Marquis. Ata, a question that came in for you is how would you want people to help support minority entrepreneurs in our community and in our country? And how can we do that?
Yeah, I think it's